everyone, welcome to Beyond Sunday. Thanks for joining us. We are recording this episode right before our weekend that we're about to have, where we are all online this weekend. Everyone will be joining us online, and so I can't even give you a report on how that went. I'm assuming it went great, and I'm assuming you preached great. Becky, welcome. Becky Fitch joining us.
Probably
and,
great
Steve
job
Ingold.
this weekend.
Right?
Probably great job. And
you know what they say about people who assume.
oh,
I don't know.
Ass of you and me.
Oh, wow.
You make an ass of. That's what it means.
We're doing that on this?
It's Beyond Sunday. We have a little bit more license on Beyond Sunday.
Okay.
Than
Cool.
we do on the weekend. Anyway, she brought it up.
Yeah, Becky,
So,
some
I
homeschool
don't-
kid you are.
Yeah. I don't know. Okay, stop laughing because we're going to talk about coronavirus.
Yeah.
I don't know when you're listening to this or what's going on. I can't even predict what's going on. If you're listening to this on Tuesday and it's 3 days or whatever since we recorded, I don't know where things will be or what's going on in the world. But you know, this is all weighing heavily on all of us as we interact with a lot of our people, and people who are like, what's the big deal? And people who are like freaked out and really extremely worried about their future and their job and what's going to happen. And so we're having all of these conversations as pastors, and that's our job. I mean, these are the moments, not just us as paid pastors, but all of us who are followers of Christ, who are saints, and we're all pastors, and we're all called to ministry and to play the same role of comforting. And so I love the encouragement that you had in your sermon, or gonna have in your sermon, at the end, because you've done your run through, and we know what you're gonna say and about pastoring us through this moment and encouraging us to not grumble and encouraging us to be light. And one of the ways we're light. So I appreciate that. What has the last week been like for you guys? I mean, I mentioned a little bit about the meetings we've been having and helping with people, but how have you guys been processing through it?
Yeah, I think for me, it was interesting this week because I'm like preparing to teach, and then things get shifted, and then I'm pulled into meetings or thinking about things that I'm usually not thinking about weeks I'm preparing to teach. And so I've kind of felt a little bit all over the place all week. But then I think that also is probably accentuated because my husband Garrett is an administrator, and so like things just got crazy at school yesterday for him, and he's wrestling through all this stuff and all these things that are normally part of their everyday, agenda at school or whatever, that is getting canceled in this. And so just him carrying that burden too as a leader in the community. And yeah, it's been interesting to wrestle through all of that, and then just take a deep breath and recenter our focus, not on the chaos around us, but on God and who He is and what He's doing and what He wants to continue to do in us and through us, even in the midst of this. And I kind of love the timing of being in Philippians, because that's the whole book where Paul's like, yeah, life's not how we expected it to be, but God's still doing so many things that we can have joy even in the midst of the craziness. And so I do like that we're literally in the perfect book for this season.
Yeah.
I think the interesting thing for me, the thing that I've been processing a lot, is that we're feeling the weight of this, but I think it's not any different than what anyone else is feeling outside of the church. And that's been an important perspective for me to keep, we're getting feedback about certain things, and people are either upset or really grateful that we're shifting services this weekend. But I've got friends that are potentially losing their jobs right now. I've got friends that, I have one friend that's a financial advisor, and he's like, I don't know what to advise. This is crazy. He said, I've been through everything from 9/11 to the recession, everything that's happened, and I've never seen anything like this. And so it was just interesting to hear how he's having to deal with it. He's on the phone all day long, and he's processing some of that stuff. And then you look at some of the things that are happening in grocery stores and all over the place. And my son's Little League just got canceled today, and until April something or other. And it's like, there's this, the new normal is that nothing's normal.
Right.
And it's so weird. And I think it's important for me to think about how this isn't just true for for us. It's true for
Mm-hmm.
everyone we lead. And that's the big thing for me is we have an opportunity as leaders within the church to lead and pastor people through a situation that there's not a playbook for.
Mm-hmm.
And Philippians, Paul, how he's leading the persecuted church through what they're going through gives us like a couple plays that we can run right
sure.
now. And I think it's so helpful, and it's so important for us to process together as a church. And my buddy who's the financial advisor, we were on the phone together, and he's like, Steve, with every adversity comes a new opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I love that so much, because that's what we all have right now is we have an opportunity not just to like, how are we going to get through this, but how do we lead us and everyone else? How do we lead people through this toward the hope of Jesus Christ? And something that transcended so much for the audience Paul was writing to, that they were able to continue on and persist like Paul was in some incredible ways, and they were able to work through their salvation at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So.
I love that.
I'm right there with you, and I'm really passionate about this being a moment. And throughout church history, you see the most difficult times being the times where the church took the most ground in terms of loving people and caring for people. The church has had a hard time in America recently. The church has been losing ground for a long time. Less people are Christian. Less people are interested in church. We can go on, and we've talked about this. But when we find ourselves in a situation like this, where your neighbors, instead of being well off and not needing God as much, maybe they enter into a situation in life where they're freaked out. The game changes. It's almost like the lights go on, and we're activated into the thing that we've been going to church, we've been going to community group, we've been learning and growing as followers of Christ. And now sometimes there's moments like this where it's like, okay, it's game time. It's time for us to love the world in the way that they need to be loved, in a way where now they're asking to be loved, whereas maybe 2 weeks ago they weren't that interested in us. And so I would never wish this situation upon us, but when this situation does come to us, I take a lot of hope in just looking at how God has moved in the past, and knowing that he's always present and he's going to be moving in the future, and that this could be something that is a blessing, as scary as it is. But I'm also like, I look at, to get more practical, I look at, the rates in China as they went really high, and then the social distancing measures that they took, and how it really decreased the amount of cases. And so we may be on the rise up, but I'm hopeful we're quickly on the rise back down, and we can resume a new normal, whatever that looks like. But we don't know. We don't know how this is going to play out, and it would be silly of us to try to assume or predict what this is going to look like over the next couple weeks and months. But I think we can take some encouragement from just like raising our eyes to a higher level, to a kingdom level of what might be God be doing through all of this. So that's my thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, that's good.
I love that. Each adversity brings a new opportunity. I might steal that for my sermon. I like it.
Just make sure you give Marty Livingston credit.
Marty Livingston.
Oh, it was Marty?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I'll give him credit. I like Marty.
Yeah, that's great. I love where you're going with the, how Paul frames work out your salvation with fear and trembling, and such a confusing verse. I think people have misquoted that verse for a long time. People
or just ignored it because they're like, that seems
it's
like
confusing,
a can of
so
worms. I don't want to get into that.
Yeah. But the way that you unpacked it, and that we dug into that concept and actually expanding our thinking about what salvation is so helpful. It gives us hope around the journey that we're on, and it's challenging, it's stretching, but it's also filled with hope in terms of the expanded definition of what salvation is. I don't know. I hadn't thought about that in a while, and so just sitting through your run through and listening to you unpack that was really cool for me. I'm sure helpful to a lot of people listening. Like you were talking about restoration and the similarities between how Paul's using salvation, work out your salvation, how he uses the word restoration in other places. You want to talk more about that?
I think that was more you. I think I was talking more about the Kyrios Lord thing.
Oh, that's right.
So why don't you talk more about that?
Well, in
thing that you're
Corinthians,
talking about?
Like,
Hey, great
I had a
setup
good
for
idea.
yourself, dude.
it was me who had the good idea. I assume
So
that was
Chris,
probably
you were
the
talking
case.
a little
Anyway,
bit
so
about
I was
like,
saying,
restoration.
in Corinthians, Paul uses the word restoration more in a very similar context. Reconciliation, he calls us to a ministry of reconciliation. It's this long-term journey of God making things right, setting things right, bringing creation back to where creation should be, which includes us as individuals, but it's the church as a whole, but then it's creation as a whole. Yeah. And we oftentimes want to minimize it. Yeah. We want to make it individual about us, or we just want to make it about the church. But it keeps, like, Paul keeps making it bigger. And causing us to look at the big picture of what God's doing. And so, I grew up similar to most people where the word salvation had a more narrow sense only, where it was a one moment where I accepted Jesus and
a
salvation
date
came.
in your past,
and then that's it. Salvation stays in that box, which that is part of it. But it was bigger than that. So that's just an interesting concept, and I don't know how many people listening, like, that's new for them and they're wrestling with that this week, or if everyone listening is like, yeah, duh, we already knew that.
Well, I think that's the interesting thing, and Beck, you did a great job talking about this, but the fact that
she's gonna do a great job talking about
it.
Well, she did a great
I mean,
job
maybe
talking about
I
it.
might not.
Great.
Maybe it'll be
she
worse.
might bomb.
I might choke.
It could be worse this weekend when you all have seen it, but we've seen the best. And I think you talked about the Jesus is Lord thing, and one of the things that I've processed, even with salvation, is like to think that we can understand the significance and scope and capacity of something like eternity is crazy. Like, I'm not that smart. I can't wait for the joke you're gonna make there, but
I have nothing to say.
But into like the omniscience of God, how do I measure up? And so I think that's where we've got to, in order to understand this, let's not just sit with what we've already known about salvation, and let's work through this with fear and trembling as well. So I think that's great.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I want to pivot off of your message, and as we wrap up, just kind of give some more instruction to our church about what's coming up with us not meeting at our 5 campuses and doing church online exclusively. And our service host talked about it with everyone this weekend, but we're
How do you know?
They will. I keep forgetting. We're pre-recording. Our service host will be talking about it this weekend, but we still want people to gather to the degree that people feel like they're comfortable with still gathering with a small group of people and do church together. Church is never meant to be like you by yourself. Although, if that's where you're at right now, that's totally okay. Yeah. And if you're most comfortable staying home and being by yourself so that you don't expose yourself, we totally get that. We're totally cool with that. There's nothing wrong with that. But also, if you're like, hey...
Or let's just say, if you're sick, for sure, stay at home by yourself.
Yes, 100%. Yeah.
But even then, that's one of the great things about Church Online is you can engage in the chat room and still be connected to your fellow
That's very true.
Cornerstoners.
Even if you're by yourself at home.
Even if you're,
Yeah, that's great. I love that. But then we also want, if you're up for it, we still want people to gather together in small groups on Sunday morning or Saturday night and experience church together, because the community part, the fellowship part of what we do is really important, and so we don't want to completely forsake that. And so we're working hard to organize, and we need the help from some of you to organize venues and locations where a small group of people can gather. Below 50 people. Oftentimes it's going to be homes, but it might be other locations that is a space on Sunday morning with a TV big enough for people to watch that. Maybe it's office space that you have at your business that you can open up and host a group of people. So we need your help in identifying those venues and people who would host those Saturday night or Sunday morning venues. And then we're going to try to get people registered to attend some of those smaller gatherings all throughout the East Bay. And your campus pastor and their team is going to be coordinating that as we get deeper into this next week and head towards week 2 of doing church exclusively online. And again, I don't know where we're going to be at by the time you all are watching this, but this may be longer than a 2-week thing where we're online only. There's no way for us to be able to predict that, but we'll keep communicating as we go along. So
yeah, hopefully not, but we'll see.
Hopefully not.
One of the things, just to comment on the church online thing, this is something that we've been talking about for a little while now. Just the opportunity to get people to meet and gather, and it's just kind of cool that God has prepared so much of this process, what you're doing this weekend or will be doing this weekend. Like 4 months ago, we were not set up like we are now to do this. And so it's just, you see God's faithfulness in some of those smaller things. And so I don't know, hold on to stuff like that. And it makes me super hopeful for where we're headed and where we're going. And God's got big plans for Cornerstone Fellowship, and I'm excited about 2020. Even though this year started off crazy, I'm excited about where we're headed. So.
That's a weird start to a year, for sure.
It is. Well, I was supposed to. I go to the March Madness tournament with my dad, and we've been going for 17 straight years, and
First year not going.
Not this year. So yeah, it's just there's things that are different, but.
Didn't you call it March Sadness?
March Sadness,
now?
yeah, that's what it is. But
you know what? Guys, you heard it here first, Steve Ingold, March Sadness.
These guys. But to be honest, those are like this is part of the stuff I'm processing too. Is like, oh, that's a bummer. But there's people losing their lives right now over sickness, and that's what we want to care for. That's what we're caring for our community.
For sure. And Amanda has been praying for a long time that your sports addiction would be
Oh my
healed.
gosh, she is
it's happening.
Thrilled right now.
You are going through withdrawals.
So baseball's canceled.
No.
Football's, well, the XFL's still going, so there's that. Basketball's
probably
done.
not by the time people watch this.
Probably not. I don't even like hockey, but I would totally watch hockey right now.
If there's nothing left to watch.
Nothing else. This is tough.
What are you gonna do?
I'd read a book, maybe. I don't know.
All right. Well, we love you guys, and we're praying for all of you. And thank you for being with us and being the church even more than we've ever been the church in this situation. And we're excited to see what God's gonna do. Talk to you later.